Viewers and subscribers, welcome back to Beating the Press podcast. I am your host, Rafa. Now, coming up in today's podcast, we're going to be talking some football. We're going to be talking some EPL, some Champions League, what has taken place in the football world over the last couple of days. We'll also be looking ahead to those big European semi-finals coming up. Champions League semi-final. Arsenal are still in it. Barcelona look like one of the favorites, but we'll be looking ahead to those matchup, and we'll also be looking ahead to some EPL action coming up on the weekend. Now, joining me this evening to really talk some football, we have returning to the podcast, Christoph.
Good to be back, viewers.
Yes, indeed, Christoph. We have had some exciting football action over the last couple of game weeks, both in the Champions League and in the EPL. We're also going to be looking ahead to those last couple of matches, which are still in the EPL, especially those teams fighting for that top four, top five position. European football come next season. And we'll be looking back at the Champions League that was, Christoph. That's where we're going to start. Arsenal versus Real Madrid. That had to have been the big match of the round. You yourself, Christoph, predicted that it was Real Madrid that will take the cake and progress. But surprise, surprise, it is Arsenal that find themselves in the semi-finals. Talk to us. How did you see that game and what are your feelings at this point in time? Can Arsenal indeed win their first Champions League title?
I think every team left in the competition has a very strong chance of winning the title. I'm sure. Well, it seems to me that a lot of people are backing potentially PSG. However, think
PSG.
I think maybe Barcelona are the strongest team left in the competition, especially with that front three that they have. Specifically, to me, Rafinha looks very strong. But I do think Arsenal have a very strong chance of winning the Champions League. I personally think they're stronger than PSG, but you said you think PSG are playing
Yeah, I
much better
mean,
in this
I I
round
I
versus
I backed PSG because they were the one who took care of business over Liverpool, which is
I
my
don't
team. So,
I don't
based
think
on that logic, is really where I'm coming from. Not to say they're necessarily playing better football than any other team in the competition, but just the grit and fight they showed to pretty much defeat the English champions, or the English champions to be. That's the reason why I
I
pushed my support behind this PSG team.
I don't put support behind PSG, not because they're playing Arsenal or anything, but because I think when they played Liverpool or when they beat Liverpool, I don't think Liverpool were at their best. And after losing after losing the first leg, I think Liverpool kind of um, internalized that they were potentially not going to go through, and again did not give the best
Well,
performance
remember it was
mentally.
penalty. It was penalty that took care of Liverpool. And I remember that
Yeah,
that game went
regardless,
to extra time. But in
regardless of if
all
it was
honesty,
penalty.
I mean Liverpool was outplayed over both legs. To be honest
Yeah,
with you,
that's what I'm
Liverpool. I
saying.
mean, they may not.
From
I don't think PSG allowed them to play. Not that they weren't at their best. They weren't. But to me, that was as a result of the sort of shackling that PSG placed on them. And PSG have followed that up by taking care of another English team in the form of Aston Villa. Can they make it three English teams in a row on their way to the final? Is the question. For me, I am showing, well, I have thrown my support behind PSG. So to me, I expect them to get the better of Arsenal and progress to the finals. What says you?
well, I don't know if they will get the better of Arsenal, in my opinion. I think, however, potentially the tie could be won or lost in the first leg. I think the first leg, regardless, I don't know where the first leg is being played right now.
Well, the
It
first
doesn't
leg is
confirm.
at Arsenal. The first
Okay.
leg is at Arsenal.
I think regardless of where the first, I think the tie for me is one in that first leg. Depending on how well either team does. If Arsenal come away with a win in that game, potentially a 2-0 win, I think Arsenal move on to
So
win it.
you're saying whoever win the first leg wins the tie, is what you're saying?
I think so. I think for the
Hmm.
first leg is key to this particular tie, in my opinion.
Well, I'm not necessarily going to call the first leg or the second leg. I'm just saying PSG to advance.
Okay.
That's pretty much my call. I'm not sure if it will be as a result of the first leg or the second leg, or it may go to penalties. My call is PSG to make it to the final. And as I said, the rationale behind that is not necessarily based on any particular outstanding performance. Granted, PSG is playing some good football and they do have players who not only can defend, but they can also put the ball in the back of the net. And they have two of the best attacking, you could say, wing backs in the world currently. Hakimi on one side, and then you have another attacking fullback on the other side as well. And of course, up front, they have the likes of a Dembele, a Barcola, and you have that. And in the midfield is quite solid and balanced also. So to me, I am not sure I see any key weaknesses in this PSG team. And I think knocking out Liverpool, followed up that by knocking out Aston Villa, I think confidence is just flowing through this team and they have all the ingredients to go all the way. So for me, as I said, my call is for PSG to advance. But how is it looking on the other side of the semi-final? Barcelona versus Inter Milan. What says you in that tie, and what was your impression of those two teams in their respective quarterfinal matchups?
Um, I was very impressed, I would say, by both teams in their matchups. More so Inter Milan, but I will come back to that. Barcelona kind of defied my expectations in that. Um, I didn't know when I made my prediction on that game that the first leg was being played at the Camp Nou. But basically Barca demolished Dortmund at the Camp Nou, and as such, they really, I mean, Dortmund put up a fight, but I don't think they were ever going to come back and beat Barcelona. After that. Inter really surprised me as well. I thought they would have lost to Bayern in the first leg at the Allianz, but surprise again. I think it was they scored two brilliant goals in that game. I think Bayern switched off after Muller came on and got them the equalizer. They switched off and then Inter really, snuck in and got that winner in that game. And I think from there on, which is why I say I think winning the first leg is kind of key going forward, is that if you lose the first leg, you have lost halftime and the
Yeah, I
opposition
mean, the
team
first leg is just halftime, really. I mean,
really.
but Bayern to me was not rooting up any trees, to be honest, Christoph. So that's not a surprising knockout for me. It was just a matter of time before this Bayern Munich team fell. In all honesty, they have not been the European giants of old. Even with the signing of Kane, there is just something missing in this Bayern team. Possibly defensively, the right balance to that team haven't been struck in order for them to put up a great challenge in Europe. I mean, winning the Bundesliga is really no challenge. I mean, that's a annual occasion for Bayern Munich, but where the gem or where the prize lies is really in European competition, the Champions League uh, competition. And they were not rooting up any trees, in all honesty. So for me, good riddance. I don't think they had any chance of really winning the title, and Inter Milan are deserved semi-finalists. Barcelona, again, no shocks there. Dortmund went to the final last season, but obviously they could not sustain that push or that growth in order to challenge again this season. Barcelona was a far superior team over both legs. And as you said, they what 4-0 in the first leg. That was game set match, similar to Arsenal winning what 3-0 in their first leg. Again, it would have taken a miraculous comeback from those big, you could say, halftime scores in order to propel those teams which are losing as halftime forward. So I think all semifinalists are deserving of their place in the semifinal. None of the wins in the quarterfinal was a fluke. Each team took care of business convincingly in my occasion. The closest match, as you mentioned, was probably the Bayern Inter game, but I thought over the course of two legs, it was the better team which progressed, and I give Inter a better chance versus Barcelona than I would have given Bayern versus Barcelona, in all honesty. But for me, in that matchup, it's hard to see beyond Barcelona, but it should be a very tight affair. but I'm gonna call Barcelona to progress over Inter. What says you?
Um, I do think Barcelona is the stronger of the two. I do think Barcelona will progress to the final in that one.
Well, interestingly as well, Barcelona plays the first leg at home,
Mhm.
and Inter has the second leg in Italy. So that to me could be a pivotal factor in all honesty. Oftentimes, what I see in the Champions League historically, Christoph, is that the team that plays the second leg at home tends to be the team that progresses forward. So
That
in
that
the
is
Arsenal PSG matchup, PSG plays the second leg at home, while in the Barcelona Inter matchup, it is Inter that plays the second leg at home. So if you're going off history, the safe call would be PSG versus Inter finals. That would be the
um
safe historical call.
I mean, I agree with you. That's what we've seen historically. In back if we say back in yesteryears when I was in high school, however, that is what we saw. Um,
I mean, even in
but
recent times, in all honesty, Christoph, it's not just from the
no,
early
no, that
2000s, but even in the 2010s to 2020s, you could say that has been the characteristic trait. The team that plays the second leg at their home tends to be the team that progresses, even if they're losing in at halftime or after the first leg. I can recall some miraculous comebacks. So, for example, Chelsea versus was it Napoli, I believe, under Mourinho when they went on to beat Barcelona in that final. I
I
can think
think
about Liverpool
I
4-0 down, I believe, from Barcelona and then coming back at Anfield. So there has been some really
I
big comebacks.
I think the most miraculous comeback I've seen is when PSG beat Barcelona in the first leg. I think it was 4-0 or something like that, only to go to the Camp Nou and lose 6-1.
So again, it just goes to show playing that second leg at home can make the big difference in these European
It
competitions. But
indeed can make a big difference, but I think in these games, in this instance, I think these games are going to be determined by those first legs. How well the home teams do in those first legs will determine. Like I said, if I believe if Arsenal win the first leg, maybe by 2 goals, I think they go on to win the tie and go to the final. If they draw or they lose, I don't see them going forward. But I think that first leg is very important because what we've seen in the competition, really is that the teams that win that first leg, they will often play that second leg, with that cushion. There is no Now that there is no incentive to attack, but they will sit and wait on those counter attacks because the team losing has to try and get those goals.
currently, I mean, the first leg result will determine how the second leg is approached by either team, in all honesty. So, you do make a good point. While the first leg should have a big impact on the overall tie, I don't think it will be the standout determinant. It will just change the way in terms of how teams tend to approach the second leg, depending on the scoreline. But in terms of your finalist, Krista, for me, it's a PSG versus Barcelona final. Enrique versus his old team. That's my call. PSG versus Barcelona. What's your call in terms of your finalists?
I mean, I would like to say Arsenal versus Barcelona, that 2006 rematch, but I don't know. I can't say for certain if Arsenal will go through to the final.
But you seem to be sitting on the fence of late, Christoph. First you call Real Madrid over Arsenal. Now you're sitting on the fence versus
I
PSG. What's going
I
on? Not much
I
confidence?
I call Real Madrid over Arsenal because of how they have really managed the Champions League over potentially the last decade, winning the majority of them, and
Right, right,
a
right.
lot of a lot of these have been comebacks, so to speak, over 2 legs. Granted, they haven't come back from a 3-0 deficit before, but you never know, all this talk about remontada garbage that they were
So,
spouting all
so,
week.
so, so not to dwell on that point though, Krista, but what's your final predicted finalists? What says you? What can you give the viewers and subscribers who have tuned in to see us or to hear our predictions? What's your call?
My call is Arsenal versus Barcelona or Arsenal versus Inter Milan.
Time is the master, Christoph. Time is the master. Still keeping your cards close to your chest, are unable to make some distinctive picks, but
But
time will tell. Time will
that was
definitely tell.
there was a distinctive pick. Currently,
So
I
Arsenal is the one constant then,
is the
basically.
one constant for me.
All
Like
right, let's say
you
less,
know,
say less. All
hard to
right, let's
say.
turn our attention to looking over there at the EPL and what took place over the weekend. Some big matchups and we had some big results. Teams are now sorting themselves out. Liverpool one win away from lifting the title. And of course, a few teams already being relegated. But where my attention will turn, Christoph, is that battle for the remaining three spots. I think Liverpool and Arsenal have locked up their respective positions in the table. 1, 2. Where the battle lies is 3 to 5. So technically, five teams are now fighting for three spots.
Not three
Uh,
to seven. You're counting out Aston Villa.
well, well,
Three to
well. I mean,
seven.
well, I mean, you could show seventh in, you could show seventh in, but I mean, realistically, it's really three spots that's left up for grabs. England may yet get that extra Champions League spot. So technically, if you finish fifth, you should be playing Champions League come next season. So two teams have already locked up their spot. So it's a battle between what you're throwing six teams in the mix. Nottingham Forest is up there fighting it out. Newcastle, with their rich run of form, have entered the fray as well. Man City have been battling hard all season, but still not being able to consistently make that push. Aston Villa entered the fray also. So there's a number of teams with distinct possibilities of making it in that top five, Christoph. What says you? What's your general feeling as to the other three teams that will join Liverpool and Arsenal finishing in that Champions League position? What's your general feeling there?
The other three teams. Um,
Right. Yes.
I
Because to me, that's where the competition really is in the EPL currently. I mean, first and second is all but sealed. There's really nothing to really write home about first and second.
I
Where the
think
competition is really in that for that top five.
that what the top five is will probably be what the same top five at the end of the season. I
So
think.
you're saying Man City, Forest, and Newcastle.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, there might be slips here and there, but I think this will be the top five. I think the teams currently holding the Champions League positions will hold them at the end of the season.
So you're pretty much writing off Chelsea and Aston Villa then.
I think so.
Because
Yeah.
Chelsea sits sixth on 57 points. And Aston Villa sits seventh also on 57 points. Probably Chelsea just ahead of them based on goal difference.
I'm not
But I
necessarily
mean,
writing them off, but I
Man
don't.
City, who is in third now, is only on 61. So that's technically one game differential between the team in third and the team in seventh.
Mhm. I don't think they have Chelsea in particular. Does to me it doesn't feel like they have the firepower. It's felt like the games recently have been a bit of a struggle to kind of dig out that win. The firepower seems lacking.
Mm.
Um, Aston Villa, I think, does have the firepower to make it into that top five, but I think Newcastle, Nottingham Forest are playing excellently at the moment. We saw Nottingham Forest knock off Tottenham on the weekend. Newcastle lost their last game, but still, I think they still look strong. Man City seems to be finding their rhythm and finding their form. The games have it has looked like a struggle to get the wins in some of these games, but I think they'll just keep going and just kind of and we know they tend to perform better at the tail end of the season. It could be that they the engines they've shifted gears now.
Right. But again, I think one of the big determining factors is the schedule, Christoph. When you look at the schedule of Chelsea, for example. So in the next game, Chelsea has Everton, then they have Liverpool, then they have Newcastle, Man U, and their final game is against Forest. So you could say you have two big 6-pointer matchups. That game versus Newcastle and the last game of the season versus Forest. Those games could be pivotal if Chelsea want to finish in the top four because if they were to win, that's 3 points to them and technically no points for Newcastle, no point for Nottingham Forest. So you're
I
taking
think
directly from your rival.
I think I don't think Chelsea will win the Newcastle game and the Everton game. I feel like the Liverpool game could go either way because by that time Liverpool would have potentially won the title and
Right,
maybe
right.
they've drifted off and in dreamland or whatever. So it could be that that is an easy 3 points. It could be that maybe Liverpool slip the next two games and and are desperate for the win and Chelsea could suffer as a result of that. So the Liverpool game could go either way, but I don't think they're going to win that Newcastle game. And potentially, based on the point standing, that final game against Nottingham Forest could mean nothing.
Possibly. When you look at Aston Villa's fixture, Christoph, it reads for a more easier schedule, for want of a better word. They have Fulham, Bournemouth, Spurs, and Manchester United. That to me is a far easier run of fixtures when compared to the run that Chelsea has. So if I was to choose between Aston Villa and Chelsea, who both sit on identical points at the moment, I would definitely have to put Aston Villa ahead of Chelsea. What says you?
Um, I, Again, I don't think either of them will make the Champions League spot.
Mm.
So
But who
eh,
finishes ahead of it, of which? Do you see Aston Villa
I
finishing ahead of
I
Chelsea or Chelsea ahead of Aston Villa?
I think Aston Villa finish above Chelsea. Yeah.
Aston Villa finish above Chelsea. That's my read on it as well, just by the difficulty of the fixture list, in all honesty. So to me, I would give Aston Villa a better chance of finishing in that top five when compared to Chelsea. Newcastle, on the other hand, Christoph. Newcastle has some interesting matches as well. Their next game is against Ipswich. Then they have Brighton, Chelsea, Arsenal, and they finish off their season versus Everton. So again, they have a couple tricky fixtures in there, but also a few winnable matches. So to me, they should get the better of Ipswich, which is their next match in the round. So you do make a good point. They could possibly finish in that top five. I would have Newcastle finishing in that top five. Fixtures plus form, I would definitely give them the edge over Aston Villa.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And then you also have Man City. So when you look at the Man City fixture, coming up for City, you have Wolves, Southampton, Bournemouth, and Fulham. Again, an easy run. Man City should at least get 3 wins out of the remaining four at bare minimum. There could be a slip here or there, but I would suspect they should get at least 3 wins. So I would definitely have Man City in that top four. And then the final team in the reckoning would be Nottingham Forest. And for Forest, they have Brentford, Crystal Palace, Leicester, West Ham, and their final game is against Chelsea. Depending on how things play out, that final game could become very interesting. That final game, you could possibly be fighting for a Champions League spot. Personally, I don't see it because I think Chelsea will lose a few games along the way. But this is a winnable. I see some winnable games in those final set of fixtures for Forest. Maybe there's a few slip up here or there, but I think they should have enough momentum to bring them across the line and finish in that top five as well. So it's hard to argue against City, Forest, and Newcastle. Those are my three picks. I feel that will finish in that top five, Krista, just based on the fixture list and the form. I think Newcastle is running into good form. Their fixture list isn't the most difficult. Similar to Man City, get picking up a bit of momentum. Squeeze the win. A late winner today versus Aston Villa. That must have drained a bit of the confidence of Villa. So I'm gonna
I,
call it that way.
I,
City, Forest, Newcastle. Those are my call for top five, along with Arsenal and Liverpool.
Right. I think Aston Villa might have switched off, and it could be a bit of a hangover, so to speak, a dip as a result of losing out
Well,
that
they also
Champions League.
have possibly have one eye on the FA Cup coming up over the weekend as well.
Could be, but hard to say at this time.
Yeah, I
Will
mean
come.
they're now out of the Champions League, so the only legitimate chance of a silverware this season is that FA Cup. So I will be putting all my marbles into that FA Cup fixture, and hopefully they can get a result from there and move on to the finals. But that is definitely a big matchup for them. They do have Crystal Palace in that FA Cup semi-final, so this is a great opportunity. If you were to pick a team to play a semi-final against, Christoph, Crystal Palace would be high up on the list. How do you think that one will shake out? Can Aston Villa make it to the final?
I think Aston Villa can make it to the final, but you could equally say Crystal Palace could make it to the final. I mean, it's a two-leg match if I recall, right?
Uh, Two leg? No, I think this is a one-off.
Isn't the
This is
semi-final isn't the
no man.
semi-final two
No,
legs?
that's the Carabao Cup is over two legs. FA Cup is one leg.
Unless
Carabao
there's
Cup
a draw.
plays over two leg.
Okay,
FA
okay.
Cup has never been played over two leg. It's all has always been one leg. And if the game is tied, I believe in the earlier rounds, then you would have a replay. But I think from this either the quarterfinal or the semifinal onward, if scores are tied, then it's extra time and then penalty shootout. So a winner has to be determined on the day. And of course, in the other semifinal, you have Forest versus Man City. So Forest versus Man City is the other matchup. How are you calling that game? Can Forest create the upset?
Calling it for Nottingham Forest. While I think City, strong, they're finding back their form. If Nottingham Forest, play to their strength, which is the counter attack, I think they get the win because we've seen where City is still weak against the counter attacks without Rodri, without somebody making those professional or tactical fouls. They have a hard time kind of cleaning up at the back there. So
So you're saying
play
that new signing has not made a dent in that Man City midfield? Gonzalez, I believe.
not 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 the same effect as Rodri. There is an effect, they're doing well, but I think they are still weak. I just think teams have not been exploiting it as much in recent weeks.
Mhm. So you're calling for the FA Cup final, uh,
Nottingham
Forest
Forest
versus
versus Aston Villa, I think.
Aston Villa
Not
versus
to say
Forest.
I still think Man City have a strong chance against them.
Right, right.
Again they're rounding out, they're picking up form, and with this potentially being the only silverware they're picking up, they could take this competition very seriously. Um,
Well, I mean, they have no choice, really. As you said, this is the only chance of a silverware this season, other than ending the season empty-handed.
no,
So,
well, what I mean is City, they're still Champions League spot up for grab. City might feel the Champions League spot is more important than making the FA Cup final.
but I mean, at this stage of the competition, this is the tail end of the competition, Christoph. You have to go for all your marbles. So, I mean, you're in a semi-final. You're technically two games away from a trophy. You have to go all in, regardless of what happens. You have to go all in. There is no point at this stage to be quote and unquote resting or rotating squads. You have to put your best 11 out there. There's
Pep,
less than 6 games remaining in the season.
Pep Guardiola is not one to necessarily put his best 11 out. Usually
Well,
when you
it's the
reach
best
this,
11 probably for him on the day.
the Pep Guardiola at this stage of competitions tends to experiment
No,
at
I
these
think the days
stages.
of experimentation from Pep are now over. I think he has
I
learned his lesson.
no,
He
I
has
don't think
matured,
so.
Christoph. Yeah,
We
man.
we saw no, we saw him do it last year.
You're not seeing any experimentation in any
We,
finals or trying to
we
pull
no, we
a
saw
rabbit out of the hat.
we saw it last season. The season they won the Champions League. He didn't do
Right?
any experimentation, but the follow-up
That's what
season
I'm
we saw
saying. That's
the
what I'm
fo-
saying. So I
the
think he has
follow-up
learned his
season.
lesson.
No, the follow-up season he went back to experimenting.
What was the experiment?
Uh, I don't remember now, but I know for a fact. I
No, sir,
recall
I
very
think he has now learned his lesson. I think, yeah, as you said, the success of that Champions League where he did it his way, the Man City way, without necessarily tweaking anything per se or tweaking anything to any large degree. Yeah, I think he has definitely learned his lesson. So I expect a full strength Man City team to roll out versus Forest for that FA Cup semi-final. For me, in terms of my call, it's going to be a tough game, but I think City has enough pedigree and they have rounded into a bit of form. That man, Kevin De Bruyne, he can find that ball which can unlock any defense. And Nottingham Forest have been one of the tightest defenses in the league, and they have translated that over into the FA Cup competition. But I think they have enough to get the better of this Forest team. And over on the other side, I would definitely have to throw my support behind Aston Villa as well. Uh, they've been playing well all season. I mean, just looking at their position in the table, they're a better consistent outfit than Crystal Palace. Of course, Crystal Palace can turn up on the day, and we know that the FA Cup competition is a competition which oftentimes throws up a lot of upset. But in this one, I'm gonna call it for Aston Villa. So for me, my final, Christoph, is Aston Villa versus Man City, and I feel Man City will win out and actually get their hands around some silverware. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a call that Man City will lift the FA Cup come May.
okay.
But time is the master. Time will definitely tell uh, as to how those two competition pans out. But what can we say, Christoph? Lots of football still remaining. Lots of football still remaining, and these last couple of games will determine a lot for the teams that's involved. You know, trophies are at this point up for grabs. Liverpool, one game away. It's all but done and dusted. They have one hand on the trophy. Arsenal possibly giving Liverpool a guard of honor at Anfield, Christoph. That should be a rather embarrassing moment for this Arsenal team.
Why should it be
Well, I
embarrassing for
mean,
Arsenal?
Arsenal was the champions elect. When you look at the punditry predictions, most, if not all, pundits had either Arsenal or Man City lifting the title this season. This is really
I
a big shock
I
if Liverpool, as is suspected, goes
I,
on to lift the title.
I don't know what punditry you're listening to, but everybody had Man City winning the title this season. Yeah,
Mm,
I agree. I agree. Nobody had Liverpool as a choice. Nobody had
right,
Liverpool as a
right.
choice, but Man City was the choice for
Yeah, I
all the
mean,
teams.
definitely, Man City has
And
fallen off. And if it wasn't
there
Man City, it was Arsenal, to be honest.
there was never a time where anybody said I don't recall anybody
Yeah,
saying
man.
they
When you
say
check the punditry list, it was either
no no
Arsenal or Man City. If it's
no,
not
no.
Arsenal, it's Man City.
I'm not saying at some point during the season, during the first half of the season, somebody didn't say they think Arsenal would win it. Because
No, man. Before the season, man. Before the season.
I definitely recall hearing Gary Neville saying that he thought Arsenal would potentially win it. But Gary Neville tends to flip flop from time to
Mm,
time based on certain things. But majority of people said it would be Man City.
Man City.
But that being said, I believe Liverpool, once they took first this season, I don't think they've lost first at any point throughout the
Mm,
season. So I
indeed.
don't know.
Well,
But
interesting times ahead. Lots more games to come, Christoph. Time is quickly running out on us, but thanks again, viewers and subscribers, for tuning in to us here on Beating the Press podcast. Christoph, thanks again for coming through and really sharing your thoughts and your opinions, even though at times you're a bit on the fence when it comes to making some of your call, but we know these are some tight calls. But viewers and subscribers, if you haven't subscribed as yet, hit that subscription bell, like the podcast, and of course, leave your predictions and in the comment section. Help us to continue to grow by sharing as well. But until next time, this is Rafa signing off.